Welcome to Dark Minds, Stories of Serial Killers. I'm Victoria, and together we'll explore disturbing and fascinating stories of historical figures who left a lasting mark on history. Today, we dive into the story of Alice Kyteler, a name that has echoed through time as the first woman in Ireland accused of witchcraft and serial murder. Get ready for an in-depth and chilling investigation into the life of a woman who defied the conventions of her era. In every dark corner of history, there are characters who challenge our understanding, figures whose lives are marked by secrets, controversy, and actions that continue to echo in mystery. In the heart of the 14th century, an era steeped in fear, plague, and the unyielding authority of the Church, the name Alice Kyteler arose. She was a singular figure in Kilkenny, Ireland, a woman of means, intelligence, and, some claimed, mystical power. But it wasn't Alice's wealth, amassed over her many marriages, that drew Kilkenny society to her. Rather, it was the mysterious deaths of her husbands, one after the other, each succumbing to a fate as dark as the shadows they left behind. While the town whispered and rumors of witchcraft grew, Alice remained calm, protected by powerful allies and the influence her fortune afforded her. In an age when Christian faith permeated every aspect of life, heresy was a capital crime, and any deviation from established doctrines could mean death. The Church's vigilant eyes watched for signs of witchcraft, and Alice's unusual behavior and growing wealth seemed to fit this feared mold. Accusations of dark magic quickly surfaced, driven by Bishop Richard de Ledrede, who believed Alice was a servant of the devil. The people of Kilkenny, horrified at her rumored involvement in forbidden practices, found themselves divided. Some feared her, while others stood by her. Society was swept into a conflict of ambition, vengeance, and faith. While the deaths of her husbands became more than just unfortunate coincidences, they became evidence of a curse or a dark pact. But who really was Alice Kyteler? How could a wealthy, successful woman evade suspicion for so long? Was she truly a mystical and deadly figure, or simply a woman ahead of her time, daring to hold on to what was hers in a world that gave little to women? The case of Alice Kyteler exposed the power of superstition and the fear of the unexplained. The accusation of witchcraft was not only a death sentence, it was a lasting stain, a mark that would haunt future generations. Thus, in 14th century Ireland, Alice Kyteler became the first woman to be formally charged with witchcraft, and possibly the nation's first documented serial killer. Kilkenny was a prosperous town, yet, like any place in the Middle Ages, it was constantly tense, caught between the sacred and the profane. Within those stone streets and wooden houses, stories traveled quickly, especially those surrounding prominent figures like Alice Kyteler. Born into a wealthy Norman family, Alice quickly learned the advantages of financial power, first through inheritance and later through her marriages. 4 husbands passed through Alice's life, each meeting a dark fate, leaving her with their fortunes. To the townsfolk, this was a clear sign of witchcraft, that Alice wielded spells to manipulate and poison those who dared unite with her. Her influence over her husbands and rumors of her mystical practices created a fearful atmosphere, transforming her into one of Kilkenny's most feared and intriguing figures. However, the fear surrounding Alice wasn't merely due to her fortune or the number of deceased husbands. It reflected her independence in a patriarchal society, where women with opinions and power were viewed with suspicion. Unlike most, Alice refused to live a submissive life. She controlled her business dealings, grew her wealth, and was active in social circles. Her self-sufficiency soon became a major factor in her entanglement with ecclesiastical authorities, particularly with Bishop Richard de Ledrede, who saw her as a threat to divine and social order. In a time when a woman with such influence was already considered a rarity, Alice further defied convention by rejecting any submission to male dominance. This attitude only deepened suspicions, and the townsfolk increasingly believed her wealth came from forbidden pacts. The charge against Alice Kyteler reflected the Church's fear of losing control over its followers, and society's readiness to punish a woman who dared to stand out. Alice was formally accused of witchcraft, of poisoning her husbands, and of performing dark rituals. Her case would become an example of the power of baseless accusations, and how an entire society could be led to believe in things unseen. The trial against Alice Kyteler symbolized not just a struggle between religious power and female independence, but also an illustration of how fear and superstition could shape the fates of men and women. And so, as the town of Kilkenny divided, Alice Kyteler faced an uncertain destiny, enshrouded in shadows that perhaps would never lift. Alice Kyteler was born in the late 13th century into a wealthy and well-connected Norman family, offering her a privileged start in life. Early on, Alice learned how to handle finances, gaining experience managing her family's wealth. Unlike most women of her era, she didn't see herself as bound by the societal constraints placed on women. In an age where women were often reduced to secondary figures, Alice was an exception. She was not only charming and charismatic but also displayed a sharp intellect, a trait that would become her trademark, one that set her apart and paradoxically placed her in danger. Some claimed her talent for manipulating situations made her appear cold and calculating, but perhaps she was simply a woman navigating a world that offered no mercy to the weak. As time passed, Alice skillfully transformed these qualities into powerful tools to achieve her goals, particularly in relationships and business. She married 4 times, and with each marriage her fortune grew. However, along with her growing wealth came the rumors. The townspeople, seeing her series of deceased husbands and the wealth transferred to her, grew suspicious. Her influence, her independence, and even her strong will were viewed as signs of something dark. Society was unprepared for a woman like Alice, who defied conventions and, to many, seemed almost supernatural in her persuasive abilities. The line between reality and superstition blurred, and Alice, who might have been respected, became increasingly feared. Was it this blend of cunning and ambition that led people to label her a manipulator, a killer? Or was it merely a reflection of a society that couldn't tolerate a woman in control of her own life and fortune? Perhaps Alice Kyteler was simply a woman in an era where female success was seen as an aberration. The truth, lost over time, was distorted through the lenses of fear and religion, but Alice's legacy endures, a figure whose life and actions defied convention, and who remains one of the Middle Ages' most controversial women. And so, shrouded in mystery and accusations, Alice Kyteler faced not only the Church's condemnation, but the weight of a society that saw any deviation as a threat. But was she truly guilty of the crimes she was accused of? Or is Alice's story a tragic example of how fear and ignorance can destroy a life? Get ready, because we're about to dive even deeper into the secrets surrounding this dark figure from medieval Ireland. If you're drawn to stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your support helps bring these narratives to life, exposing the darkest secrets of history. Subscribe to Dark Minds to keep following our journey into the shadowy side of humanity. 4 men, 4 lives prematurely ended. Alice Kyteler's story is marked by this dark sequence in which each husband met a mysterious fate. First, William Outlaw, who died early, leaving a substantial fortune to Alice. Then came her 3 other husbands, Adam le Blund, Richard de Ledrede, and finally, John le Poor. Each of them died under suspicious circumstances, seemingly after suffering quick and painful illnesses that many described as curses or invisible poisons. With each death, the rumors surrounding Alice grew stronger. They said she used sorcery, potions, and dark words to get what she wanted. But was this true? Or did these men simply fall victim to the common diseases of the time? There's no clear answer, but in the eyes of medieval society, Alice was becoming increasingly feared as a ruthless killer, a woman without mercy. Her supposed choice of victims was also unsettling. She didn't seem to choose just anyone. All the men who married Alice were wealthy, powerful, and part of the elite social and financial circles, allowing her to acquire more wealth with each new marriage. The perception that she carefully selected her victims to gain the most from each union created an image of a calculated predator, a woman who used marriage as a lethal weapon. To many, Alice was a witch who poisoned men slowly until, weakened and dying, they had no choice but to leave their fortunes to her. In an era of scientific ignorance and deep-rooted beliefs in mystical forces, this story fit perfectly into the popular imagination. Each death was seen as proof of her malice, and Alice's figure grew darker and more terrifying with each passing. But did she really plan each death? Or was Alice, as a wealthy and powerful woman, simply the ideal target for society's frustrations and fears? The passage of time and the nature of the reports make any verification of facts difficult. If Alice was indeed guilty, her methods were cruel and ingenious, using what people called black magic to destroy lives. But if she were innocent, her story represents how easily a powerful woman could be transformed into a witch, a monster deserving of the harshest punishment. In either case, Alice stands as a symbol of mystery, ambition, and tragedy. For almost 3 decades, suspicions about Alice Kyteler continued to grow. Between 1280 and 1324, she was married 4 times, with each marriage ending in a suspicious death. As the years passed and her wealth grew, fear spread among the people of Kilkenny. The deaths were neither quick nor quiet. It was said that the men suffered, struck by illnesses that appeared almost supernatural. Some reports mentioned sudden weakness, cold sweats, and hallucinations, symptoms that, at the time, were considered signs of poisoning. It was as if a curse hovered over the men involved with Alice, a fate from which no one could escape. And each of these deaths created a cycle of distrust, where Alice's figure became increasingly feared and isolated, marked by what many believed was a supernatural force. The years of Alice's alleged activity reflected a shift in society itself. As the Church's power grew and it enforced its doctrines, witchcraft became the ultimate sin, an evil that had to be eradicated at any cost. And Alice, with her power and influence, was the perfect target. Bishop Richard de Ledrede saw in her not only a threat to faith but a challenge to the town's moral order. Her powerful, independent presence represented everything the Church fought against, and he wouldn't rest until she was exposed as a servant of darkness. In 1324, the Church authorities finally launched a formal investigation, gathering witnesses and evidence against her. It was a trial that transcended Alice's life, symbolizing the struggle between Christian morality and popular beliefs in curses and dark magic. This marked the beginning of the end for the mysterious figure who had so long defied the social order. The witchcraft accusations culminated in a historic trial. Under pressure from the bishop, and with the town living in fear, Alice was formally charged with poisoning and witchcraft. Even with questionable witnesses and evidence, her reputation was already damaged. The events unfolded with an inevitable weight, and to Kilkenny's people, Alice now embodied a sinister force, the invisible evil everyone feared. Her fate was practically sealed even before any formal verdict was announced. Alice Kyteler faced relentless persecution, not from a police force as we know it, but from the Church, which in the Middle Ages served as legislator, judge, and executioner. When suspicions became unavoidable, Bishop Richard de Ledrede took it upon himself to lead the investigation. It was a process filled with forged testimonies, torture, and manipulation. Determined to prove Alice's guilt, the Church summoned witnesses, and, as it was said, extracted confessions of witchcraft and poison through brutal methods. However, Alice didn't surrender easily. With her intelligence and powerful allies, she resisted the persecution for a long time, using her wealth and influence to shield herself from the accusations. The bishop, however, would not rest until he saw her punished for the crimes he was convinced she had committed. As the trial progressed, Alice secured the support of influential figures and powerful friends. With this network of protection, she managed to delay the inevitable sentence for a significant time. Yet the net tightened around her, and eventually, her powerful position was not enough to resist the Church's determination. Her influence, which once kept her safe, began to crumble as the bishop gained more public support. Knowing that execution was imminent, Alice made a radical decision. In 1324, she escaped from the city, vanishing into England, where she was never seen again. Her escape marked the end of a figure that had challenged social order, and Alice's disappearance left Kilkenny in an eerie silence. However, Alice's escape did not mean an end to the consequences. As punishment, her servant, Petronilla de Meath, was captured, tortured, and burned alive in the town square. To many in Kilkenny, this was justice served in the name of religion, but to others, Petronilla's suffering was an injustice, a cruel sacrifice. The Church had succeeded, at least partially, in achieving what it desired, a severe example of punishment for anyone who dared defy its doctrines. And thus, the case of Alice Kyteler was closed, but her story would become a turning point in witchcraft accusations and the fear of unseen forces. And so, the question remains, was Alice Kyteler a calculating killer, who manipulated and eliminated her husbands in exchange for power and wealth? Or was she a victim of circumstances, caught in a society that could not accept the independence and strength of a woman? Her story raises questions that transcend time, questioning how superstition and fear can lead a society to destroy a life. Perhaps, if Alice had lived in a different era, she would have been seen differently. Perhaps, she would have been respected for her intelligence and abilities. But in the 14th century, she was seen as a monster, a threat that had to be eliminated. Her dark legacy survives to this day, not as that of a witch or a killer, but as a symbol of a much larger struggle. Alice Kyteler represents the countless women who were condemned without proof, victims of a system that saw every independent woman as a potential for evil. Alice's story reflects how fear and ignorance can turn ambition and determination into something feared and destructive. And so, the name of Alice Kyteler continues to echo in history books, a mystery unresolved, a dark enigma that we may never fully understand. Do we truly know all of Alice Kyteler's secrets? Or were her actions distorted over time by those who sought to see evil in her that may never have existed? In the end, the question remains, what is the true power of superstition? How many lives were destroyed by what could not be explained? In Alice's story, we find a profound reflection on the limits of morality, judgment, and human understanding.